wait so the clock says 3 o'clock. This one says 3:57. We're close enough, aren't we? Okay, councillors, could we take our seats, please? Okay. Good, thank you. Welcome. It's not over yet, you can't leave. Okay, you ready? Yes, sir. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, I'd like to call this meeting to order and turn it over to our clerk. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I would like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and for those in attendance, I would ask you to ensure your phones are on silence mode. I would like to thank our camera volunteer for tonight, Judianne again. Thank you very much. As this is our last meeting prior to Remembrance Day, I think it's appropriate to ask all those in attendance to stand and acknowledge the sacrifices made on our behalf through a moment of silence. Thank you all. Please be seated.
Mr. Clerk, approval of the agenda, changes to the agenda?
Yes, we have no changes to the agenda.
So we're all right there?
Yes.
Councillors, any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Columbus, please.
Mr. Chairman, it's with respect to report EBS 1759, the taxi cab owner's license for Guardian Transit. Wayne Columbus is a relative of mine, and I will declare a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Duly noted. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Noted. So there's no changes to the agenda. Do we have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented?
Councillor Black and Councillor Oliver. All in favor? Motion is carried.
All right, so before we begin the agenda, we have a new staff member in attendance that Sarah Townsend would like to introduce.
Thank you. Through the chair to council. Mayor and council, it gives me a distinct honor tonight to introduce our new Deputy Chief of EMS Services. Dean Casement comes to us with over 26 years of experience in the EMS field, extensive education background behind him as well, and we're looking forward to partnering him with the future, and we just welcome Dean, and we'd like to introduce him to you tonight.
Welcome. We hope you enjoy your tour of duty here.
So that brings us to presentations, and the first presentation that we have tonight is from the Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation.
That would be you, Mr. Miller. And I think the 10-minute... so you have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and if you go to 9 minutes, I'll let you know you're at 9 minutes, and you have 1 minute more to go. And after that, there will be questions. You've been here before, so you know the routine. Whenever you're ready, you may start.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mayor Luke, councillors, and staff members. My name is Jeff Miller. I am the president of Haldeman Norfolk Nonprofit Housing. I'm here today with Deborah Felice, our CEO, to present our 2016 annual report to Norfolk County as one of our 2 municipal shareholders. Before I begin, I would like to thank and acknowledge board members Brian Snyder from Haldeman, Jean Montgomery from Port Dover, or from Simcoe, Norfolk County, Ken Lishman from Haldeman, Wayne Thomas from Norfolk County, Councillor Bernie Corbett from Haldeman, and our Councillor Mike Columbus for their contributions during the past year, and our sincere thanks to all HNHC staff for the wealth of knowledge and experience that complements their work. We have circulated the annual report and the audited financial statements for 2016. You will note, as a result of shareholder feedback last year, we have included the previous year's financials on the annual report so that you may have a reference point for comparison. I want to highlight that the HNHC portfolio represents $55 million in assets to its shareholders, and these assets have been successfully operated from a financial and operational perspective for the last 43 years. We have undertaken a regeneration study that has assessed these assets and confirmed to secure our future. In some cases of aging stock, it is time for a new approach, with efforts targeted strategically to the development of new affordable housing. As with all assets, you reach a point when replacement is needed, and we look forward to working with many collaborative partners and our shareholders, Haldimand and Norfolk County, to increase housing stock and resident services. I would like to come back at a later date and share this regeneration study with you. With respect to the annual report before you, I would like to report that on the increase in the 2016 administration costs, this was primarily the result of an extensive technology enhancement project involving costs associated with full upgrade of our Yardi property management software. By continually modernizing our operations, this helps us to make informed decisions about future directions. The increase is also in part a result of economic wage benefit and pension costs, and as a result of reduced mortgage costs and reassessed property values. The surplus of $63,928 is beneficial in offsetting the operational deficits of 2014 and 2015. Although there does exist unmet capital needs, we follow a 25-year capital plan that is continually updated as priority capital needs. This is coupled with a comprehensive, responsive maintenance program and regular inspections. On page 2 of the annual report, we have summarized the capital work completed in Norfolk portfolio, which includes $283,000 investment in building components such as roofing, windows, asphalt resurfacing, furnace replacement, accommodation needs, and improvement of life safety systems. In closing, there was a recent report issued by the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness called Leading the Way, describing a 10-year investment in expanding the supply of affordable housing. The NHHC efforts align with the messaging in this report, when homelessness prevention is defined as policies, practices, and interventions that reduce the likelihood that someone will experience homelessness, and of the provision of necessary resources and support to stabilize their housing, enhance integration, social inclusion, and ultimately reduce the risk of homelessness. Looking to the future, it is the assets that the value-added services provided by NHC that will ensure a sustainable, affordable housing program so very much needed in both counties. Thank you very much for this opportunity and your ongoing support. Deborah and I would be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that good but short report. Councillors, questions? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jeff, for your report. Your annual report is always very succinct and yet has a lot of information in it, which we appreciate. I just want to ask you a question on the, I guess, the back of your letter. In other words, the first page of the report, where it talks about rent payment performance rates, 91.98. In other words, 92% successful collection of rent. I gather that's what that indicates.
Yep.
So 2 questions for you. How does that number compare to last year? And how do we compare to other housing corporations, social housing corporations across Ontario? Are we more or less or about the same in terms of our rental payment success?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Actually, our rent arrears have dropped over the last 5 years. We prepare a graph for each board report, and it shows at a glance a 12-month scale or graph. And over the last 5 years, our arrears are dropping consistently. As to how that compares to other social housing providers, we do a very good job at HNHC. We also move our past tenant arrears to a collection process as well. But throughout that whole focus of current arrears or past tenant arrears, the greatest focus is on eviction prevention. So although we want to collect the rent, we also want to prevent homelessness. So we put a strong focus on eviction prevention as well.
Further questions? Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the deputation. I see things are turning around a bit here slightly. You were in a negative position last year, and now we're up. It's nice to see the 2015, 2016 comparators. Some of the things I see here, I just have a question on. It says municipal taxes have dropped from $676,000 to $604,000. How did that happen?
So through you, Mr. Chair, that was a result of a reassessment of taxes through MPAC. So we benefited by that process.
Okay, that's a bonus, I guess, for you guys and less for us. But also, like cash flow from operating, this is on 13 of our report, page 5 of your statements. You're in a negative $211,000 position, and now it's up to $44,000. But when I look at some of the financials, you'll see like your payables have climbed a lot.
Yes.
And your investments are down. So you've pulled money out to kind of balance out the figures. Is that how it is?
Certainly expenses are going up because of aging stock. You know, we try to garner contracted services as best we can from local contractors. But with aging stock, often we're having to repair versus replace. We need to be investing more money, excuse me, more money into capital repairs. And then, sorry, the last part of that question
Was the investments you've pulled out?
So our investments are pooled through a program with Social Housing Corporation. I would have to get back to you as to why funds were withdrawn and what they were allocated to.
No problem there. Since you mentioned that you have to, do you tender? Do you have a purchasing policy that sends things out to keep everybody competitive?
Yes, we do. Actually, there were 31 tenders put out in the last few months for our contracted services, so we very much follow a strict purchasing process.
Okay, and then I did notice in this report you're not recommending that you retender out your auditor itself.
Actually, we will be doing, for 2017, we'll be using the same auditor that was approved by the Board of Directors, and then 2018, we will be going out to tender again.
Okay, thank you. One last question through the chair is, this is dated June 6th. It's November.
Where have you got it dated June 6th?
Page 9.
Page 9.
I believe that's when your auditor did this report,
Yes, that's correct.
but then it took 5 months or so to get here?
Well, we normally come with our annual report at the end of the year.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for your answers. Councillor Black.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jeff. I heard you say something about replacing stock, and you got me worried. I think all the stock that we have was downloaded by the province, so we inherited that for a trade-off. So are you suggesting that Norfolk County all by itself is going to have to ante up and provide enough funds for brand new stock when it was really the province that provided the brand new stock in the first place? I mean, we're having trouble with reserves and fixing and, you know, capital repairs, let alone building new, unless the money's coming from above.
Do you want to answer that?
You can answer it, yes.
Okay. So through you, Mr. Chair, we completed a regeneration study, and it's just now in its final stages of being a completed report. That report will lead to a communication plan, and Jeff had mentioned wanting to come back to council to share more information regarding that report. But what it more or less suggests that we look at the underperforming units that we might have, that section of a portfolio that might be costing us more money than it should because we're having excessive repairs. And as Jeff mentioned, as you have 40, 50-year-old stock, you reach a point where it doesn't meet accessibility needs for the tenant's requirements. You're basically putting money into a very old product where it could be cheaper to rebuild. And when you rebuild, often you're replacing one unit with 2 or 3 units. So that's the strategy under the regeneration plan, is not to decrease the amount of stock we have, is to increase it. As far as the cost to regenerate, Some of that, we would hope to garner some of the provincial federal funding that's coming down the pike. Also, we look to refinance. The mortgages for H&HC are all paid, so sometimes you're able to divest and re-leverage.
Very much appreciate it.
You're welcome. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing one more quick question for me. On page 7 of our agenda, which is the second page of your annual report, I was glad to see you've been successful in getting $362,000 in federal provincial funding.
That's right.
Is that reflected in the chart on the first page? In other words, I see only for 2016, 169,516 identified federal provincial funding. Is it in there somewheres? And if so, does it influence the fact that you ended up with a healthy surplus in 2016?
No, those SHIP funds are accounted for separately. We
Okay.
were very grateful to receive those, but we account for those separately than the H&HC normal budget.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. We have no further questions. Mayor Luke, you have a question, Councillor Columbus?
Mr.
Before
Chairman,
I
I
go
don't
to
have a
Mayor Luke?
question, but I just want to make a comment.
Please.
That having sat on this board for a number of years, I can tell you that the board of directors are very pleased with the results, and the Norfolk Housing Corporation staff and management, they operate efficient and effective operation. 8% vacancy rate dealing with social needs is very good. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Mayor Luke, please.
Thank you, Chairman Wells. I would like to move that we receive this deputation. Does the clerk require any sort of motion also in the way of accepting or approving or receiving? I look for direction from him if he wishes more than just receiving his information.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I'd suggest committee receive the audited financial statements.
So move, Mr. Chair, that we receive it as
We have a motion on the floor to receive the audited financial statement, seconded by Councillor Sonnenberg. All in favor? Or did you wish to speak to it,
Could
Mayor
I make
Luke?
a quick comment?
Oh, please do.
I just want, on behalf of council, say to you two, this is extremely well done, Mr. Chair.
Right.
The Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation provides housing in both Haldeman and Norfolk. 12 apartment buildings, 99 residential units or family homes, as they call them. A board of 7 members, a staff of 13 people, and on a $3.2 million budget, which includes both operating and capital costs. Last year, they were able to come forward with a $64,000 surplus. So I would really like to say congratulations to staff, Deborah, Jeff, you and your board. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak.
You're more than welcome. Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried, and again, thank you very much for coming. We look forward to seeing you next year with very positive results. Okay. Continuing with our agenda. Mr. Clerk, where are we going next?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So we have another presentation from Jennifer Kirkham, but first, I believe Heidi wants to introduce it.
Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of council, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Ms. Jennifer Kirkham from Mischievous Cat Productions. Ms. Kirkham has been working with us at Children's Services on the development of the research and the writing of our community needs assessment and community plan for the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres. By way of introduction, I would say that this is a very transformative time in Ontario for childcare and early years programming. We have been at this council talking about the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres. We've been talking about childcare expansion. We've seen the introduction of full-day kindergarten and some much-needed updates to the legislation that governs childcare in the province of Ontario. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kirkham, and she's going to present her work with the community on the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centre Community Plan.
Thank you very much for that. And just so you know, I just checked with the clerk. We certainly welcome you here, but you also are only have 10 minutes.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
You may
you.
start whenever you wish.
Thank you. So I have a slide deck, so if you want to take a peek on your screens as well. As Ms. Van Dyke noted, this is a time of transformative change in children's services. One of the areas that the province is focusing on right now is in the area of child and family programs. So you'll see in terms of context in the past, and right now there are currently 4 different child and family programs that are funded by the province across Ontario. Those include Ontario Early Years Centres, Parenting and Family Centres, Family Resource Centres, and Better Beginnings, Better Futures. Currently, you have 2 of those operating in Haldimand, Norfolk. You have Ontario Early Years Centres and you have Family Resource Centres. As of January 1st, 2018, all 4 of those programs will be transitioning to what they're calling Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres. You'll now see new branding, which was announced, I think, last week. So now they're being called Early On Child and Family Centres. So as of January 2018, you'll start to see this. The funding for these 4 programs is being collapsed into one. Instead of them being funded by the province, this funding will now flow through you as the municipal service manager, and you will be funding these services across your 2 counties. So in terms of a new role, the first thing the province asked all of the municipal service managers to do was to do a community needs assessment. So to go out and find out what was needed in your community and to develop an initial plan that was to be submitted to the province September 29th. So the County of Norfolk has submitted a plan. You'll see it today. It's here for approval. There's an ongoing role for you as well. So this is a new program area that you'll be managing as a municipal service manager. So you'll be responsible for managing the funds that will flow to you from the province. So it'll be 100% provincial funding to fund these new programs and services. So you'll be funding them, and you'll also be managing oversight and quality and managing the full system of services. There are a number of mandatory core services that you'll see in these new child and family centers across the province. The province has always done a really great job of providing guidelines that are at a fairly high level and letting local communities develop programs and services that are unique to them. So the planning guidelines that the province has put forward around these just mandate 3 different types of services. One is around engaging parents and caregivers, so that's providing information and advice to parents around child development, nutrition, and other things, providing pre- and postnatal supports, as well as doing some targeted outreach to communities and populations that maybe aren't accessing current programs and services in your communities. The second mandatory core service is called Supporting Early Learning and Development. This is really about drop-in and other play-based programs that involve adult-child interaction. And the third mandatory core service is really about making sure that families and children are connected to the other programs and services they may need, like speech and language or other things. I want to talk to you a little bit about the local needs assessment. I'm hoping you've had an opportunity to read it. If you haven't, it's a really great document that provides some really good data about your community. As I said, this was one of the things the province asked to be done because they wanted to make sure that your plans for these new child and family centers were data-driven or evidence-informed. That's what you'll see in your local needs assessment. We had a really good engagement process, so we involved parents and caregivers. You had over 260 surveys that were completed by parents across Haldimand, Norfolk. We involved children, so children drew and wrote children's activity sheets for us. We had more than 160 completed. We had service providers involved. We did 4 different sessions with your Best Start network, as well as had service providers complete a survey. And we also held meetings with your current child and family program providers and different school boards. And along with that, we captured a lot of data. I'm just going to give you a really quick look at the data. In terms of what families said, we looked at what they said across 4 different pillars. We looked at what they said around affordability. In terms of affordability, no surprise, parents want free or low-cost programs. One of the key things that came up across your communities was the need for physical activity or recreation programs that are affordable for families. In terms of access, people want their programs and services to be available in their communities or their neighborhoods, so close by to them. We heard them say that school is the preferred location to access programs and services. And around access, we also heard that people aren't always aware of what's available and they don't know where to go to find out information. In terms of quality, people really like staff that are welcoming and create an inclusive environment for them. And in terms of responsiveness, people want services available different times of the day, different days of the week, so not just a Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 kind of service. They also would like to see services available online and that they're accessible for people of all abilities. In terms of the data, we wanted again to look at locations or potential locations for these new child and family programs and services. So we looked at a lot of data. I'm just going to show you 2 slides. This first slide shows you where children age 0 to 6 live in Haldeman, Norfolk. You'll see by the darker areas where you have a higher population of children. So if you take a look at the map, you'll see places like Delhi, Simcoe, Waterford, Port Dover, Port Rowan, Jarvis, Hagersville, Caledonia, Cayuga, and Dunnville being sort of the population centers where you have higher numbers of children aged 0 to 6. So that's a key indicator when you want to know where to locate programs and services because you want to put them where kids live. The other thing, though, we wanted to look at is where there are potential levels of higher vulnerability or where there may be families that are more at risk than others. One of the indicators we looked at for that is something called the Early Development Instrument. This is an instrument that's used in kindergarten and is applied by kindergarten teachers. It's a measure of children's ability to meet age-appropriate developmental expectations. So again, if you look at the map, again, those darker colored red areas are the areas where you're seeing a higher than average percentage of children that are vulnerable on one or more of the domains in the Early Development Instrument. So again, you're seeing Dunnville, Port Dover, and Simcoe showing up there. Your current service model has 10 sites right now across the 2 different counties. You have 2 main sites, one's in Simcoe and one's in Caledonia, and you have 8 satellite locations. Right now you have about 134 direct hours of service. Your current operator for these programs and services is Haldeman Norfolk Reach. When we looked at developing the new service model, we wanted to look at it by community because we heard parents say they want to have programs and services available close to them. We also looked at where children live as well as some of those vulnerability indicators. We're also looking at a school-based and a non-school-based model with a number of different ways of actually providing service. So you'll see opportunities for main sites, which is more of a dedicated physical space where there'll be full-time hours. Satellite sites, which is more a set-up, take-down space, so it's not there all the time, offered more on a part-time basis. And pop-up sites, which will be offered in more non-traditional kind of places. So the plan for locations, if you take a look at the initial plan that's in the very back of that large community needs assessment, you'll see that we're actually recommending that you increase the number of sites that you have, so adding in 4 additional sites in terms of new locations, as well as adding additional hours of direct service per week to some of your other sites. So what you're going to end up with is a bigger program service model where you're able to serve more families and children. You're providing it in more communities across your 2 counties and providing more hours of service. Those hours of service will also include evening hours, so for those families that are working during the day, and weekend hours. So moving forward, you would have seen a report from your staff at the end of August talking a bit about a transition phase for this. So your staff have recommended a transition phase. You're not going to change to a new model with a flip of the switch January 1st, 2018. So they're recommending that we do a 9-month transition phase. And over that transition, that Haldeman Norfolk Reach will remain as the service provider and the same level of service. So basically a status quo for the first 9 months. Over that period of time, staff have already reported to you that they will be undertaking a request for proposal process to select a new service provider or service providers as you move into the new model. So beginning October 1st, 2018, you should have a new service provider in place. You'll see those service enhancements happening. So you'll have targeted outreach, you'll have more virtual services, there'll be service hours offered on evenings and weekends, increased summer hours, and you'll also see the expansion to those 4 new sites as well as those additional hours. So that, in a nutshell, is what you will find in your community needs assessment and initial plan. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have about that, and then Ms. Van Dyke's going to move on to the staff report.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your report. It is very detailed. My question is on page 39 of the document, and it talks about OnMarg uses census data from 2001 and 2006 to illustrate levels of marginalization across the province. That's like 10 to 15 years ago. Why wouldn't we use something more recent?
So this is a data set an index that we don't control. It's done province-wide, and the last time they did it was based on that data. We did look at other social risk indicators beyond this, but this is one of the pieces that we use just specifically looking at your low German-speaking population to get a better sense of them.
So do you think it's changed a lot over the past 10 years, or is it still pretty accurate?
I think in terms of how we've used it with the low German-speaking population, it would be fairly accurate. We also met with groups that are working with that population. Data gives you one picture, but it's that contextual piece as well. So we met with groups to make sure we had a good sense of their thoughts and experience working with that group.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for your report. It's detailed, but it was very readable and very informative, so thanks for that. I just have one question, and I probably saw it in the document and have missed it now, but I know one of the proposed satellite centers would also be in Simcoe, and Simcoe, of course, is home to one of the major centers. Where in Simcoe was the proposed satellite second location, or have we got to that level of detail yet?
No, though there is, right now in Simcoe, it isn't full-time hours, and it's at St. Mary's School. And we also, the County of Norfolk is working with the school board and have identified Hagersville Secondary School as a potential site for a main site. So there are 2 sites that would be currently available, though they have to be confirmed.
Further questions? Seeing none, councillors? What do you wish to... Councillor Height, please.
Receive as information.
Seconded by Councillor Brunton. All in favor? And thank you very much. And you were 9 minutes, by the way. Did very well. Okay. Do we have any other deputations?
So it's back to Heidi for the staff report now.
Okie dokie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of council, the purpose of this staff report is to seek council's support for the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centres Plan, and also to receive approval to add 1 permanent full-time, non-union, full-time equivalent staff to the Children's Services team within the Social Services Division in order to manage the service delivery contract and this portfolio, beginning January 1st, 2018. First of all, I would like to thank Ms. Kirkham for her report and for the work that she did with us and our community in researching and writing the community needs analysis and the Ontario Early Years Child and Family Centre Plan. We are very excited about the early on child and family centers that we will be managing starting January 1st, and we're very pleased with the outcome of the plan and the work product. So I would like to thank her on behalf of the Children's Services team for her work. As she stated, we did submit this plan to the Ministry of Education by the required deadline of September 29th, and the ministry knows that it is pending council approval. Because of our reporting deadlines and our reporting structure through the Social Services Advisory Committee, there are times where our reports go to the ministry pending council approval, and that the ministry understands that, and that's acceptable to them. We have received some initial feedback from the Ministry of Education on our report, and the feedback has been extremely positive. Our program supervisor at the ministry shared with us at the staff level that they think it's a very good plan, they think it's a very workable and strong plan, and that it's really data-driven and evidence-informed. So I wanted to share that with council as well. I would like to focus on the recommendation in the staff report that requests a staff person be added to the Children's Services team to manage this portfolio. The Children's Services team in Social Services is a team of 5 staff with 1 staff member working at the program manager or supervisor level. That supervisor, that program manager, currently manages and oversees the entire system of licensed childcare in Haldimand and Norfolk, as well as manages the service delivery contracts that we have for other programs such as licensed home childcare and special needs resourcing. The portfolio of the Early On Child and Family Centers is a significant increase to our responsibility as the Consolidated Municipal Services Manager as it's related to licensed childcare and early years programming. So it really does require a dedicated supervisory position to oversee it. As Ms. Kirkham stated, we are not going to be directly delivering the services as the CMSM. We are going to be entering into a service delivery contract. But as the service manager, we are responsible to the Ministry of Education for ensuring that the funding is allocated appropriately, that it is spent appropriately, and that we are meeting all of the program guidelines and all of our quality assurance measures and program outcomes. So it's for that reason that we are respectfully requesting the addition of a staff member to our team. This is a permanent responsibility that is being added to our portfolio, and the funding that has been added to our base funding for childcare and early years, and it is annualized. And we are committed to ensuring that the costs of the staff person do not exceed the provincial funding that is available. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, and I see we have some. Councillor Black.
Well, it looks like it's, first of all, it's mandated by the province, so we really have no choice. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they are providing the funding, though, but we are administering it, and they're giving us 10% of the funding and allocated towards, I guess, your department to administer it. And, you think that that's enough money for you to take care of this position?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Black, you are correct that within the funding envelope for the Child and Family Centers, we are permitted to retain up to 10% for our administration, which for this program, as is stated in the staff report, is $107,000. We are currently looking at other provincial funding that we receive in childcare that we could partner with our Child and Family Center funding. And in order to do that, we would also be transferring some responsibilities or realigning some responsibilities within the team in order to help mitigate some current workload pressures that we have. Children's Services is one of those areas that the mandate has expanded considerably over the last couple of years. And it's one of those areas where we see the role of the municipality as the Consolidated Municipal Services Manager strengthening. It's not being reduced by the province. So any opportunity that we can have to ensure that we have adequate resources on the team using our provincial funding, we want to take advantage of that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I would move the recommendation in the report.
We have a motion on the floor. We need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Columbus. Any further comments? Councillor Sonnenberg.
Just a question to Ms. Van Dyke. Ms. Van Dyke, what age group are we talking here?
So through you to Councillor Sonnenberg, we're talking ages 0 to 12, if I'm correct. I'm looking to Ms. Kirkham to help. For the Child and Family Centers? The focus is 0 to 6. Right. The focus is 0 to 6, but we do currently within our system have some school-age programming as well, but primarily the programs will be geared towards age 0 to 6.
And I'm wondering what the trend is like in Norfolk County for the number of children in that age group. I know schools are closing because we don't have enough children to fill them. I just wonder what the population is of this particular needy group of children.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Sonnenberg, as part of the community needs assessment, our data analysis coordinator developed community profiles. So for each of our more urban centers within Haldeman and Norfolk, there was a community profile, and that included data around the numbers of children ages 0 to 6 and 0 to 12 in each of the communities. And I don't have those numbers on me today. Certainly I can provide them, but we did use those numbers to inform the communities where we would be establishing a child and family center, or maybe where we already had an OEYC, an early year center, but we wanted to increase the hours. So for example, one of the communities that that we noted was the town of Waterford, where the population of children is increasing, and the numbers of children using the current services was higher than we anticipated. So based on that data, Waterford appeared as a community that could support increased child and family services, child and family center services, based on the population of children.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, please. I got you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Heidi, for your report as well. I certainly support this, but I do have some reservations, and perhaps you know where I will be coming from on this comment, again, relative to 100% funding. This is a brand-new initiative that is being turned over to us by the province effective January 1st, 2018. So, and the amount of money, which was 1.076 million, how was that number arrived at, first of all?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Oliver, the province, the Ministry of Education had a funding formula that they used.
Okay.
It consisted of the current funding levels for the Ontario Early Year Centres, plus funding for the Data Analysis Coordinator, plus funding for the Family Resource Centres, plus funding for the Early Literacy Specialists, and then there were some additional funds province-wide that were added into the system as a whole and divided up across the province. So in Haldeman and Norfolk, overall, we are seeing an increase in funding into the system compared to what we currently have.
Okay, thank you. And when we put out our RFP, at that point, of course, we will know whether or not everything that we want delivered is going to be able to be delivered by the successful bidder in the RFP process. I guess we really won't know until that time, correct?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Oliver, that's correct.
Okay, all right. And I'm leading somewhere with my question, or questions plural, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your
No problem.
your
You have the floor.
leniency there. And I'm saying what if kind of scenario. If the proposals come back and they are higher than the 1.076 million minus 107,000 that would be used for our administrative costs, including the position, what do we do then?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Oliver, when we developed the community plan for the child and family centers, this is really our ideal plan. So when we look at the number of sites that are being proposed, the locations of the sites, the example that I would provide is that based on the data that we have, we believe that Simcoe could support a main site and a satellite site. That would be an enhancement to the current level of service that we have. So we would have to go back and look at how the plan can be scaled back in order to make sure that we stay within our funding envelope from the province.
Okay. But you are, at this point in time, pretty confident, or at least hopeful, but hopefully confident, that we will be able to do everything that we have contained within this plan within the remaining amount of funding, some $900,000 roughly.
Mr. Chair, I would say that I am both confident and hopeful.
Okay. Fine. And my final question, and this is a request if the chair will allow it, to make an amendment to the motion. And that's going to be, Heidi, I realize in the staff report, staff are making their commitment, and I'll just quote from page 3 of the report at the top. Staff will ensure that all costs associated with this program and the additional FTE remain within the provincial funding envelope from the Minister of Education. I understand that, and I appreciate that. When we were talking about the coordinated homelessness initiative a few weeks ago, I proposed an amendment to the motion so that it's right in the actual motion that becomes the public record, so to speak, that there would be annual reporting to council to confirm continued 100% provincial funding. Would you be comfortable with that as an amendment?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Oliver, yes, absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if I may, that's going to be an amendment that I would propose to add that wording to the bottom of this motion.
And I'm going to get back to you just in 1 second. The clerk is writing that. But in the meantime, I'll ask the county manager who wishes to speak. On this? Yes, please.
I've now been here just a little over a half a year, and this is the second time this issue has fairly and reasonably come to this council's attention. It occurs to me that a better mechanism for us to adopt as a corporation would be for staff to bring county council a policy proposal to you that requires us to account to you on an annual basis. We're doing this piecemeal. And each time we write a report, we say we're going to account to you, and then we modify our motions. But I think what you should expect, and what we should provide to you reasonably every year, is a list of those provincially funded positions, and whether or not the provincial funding adequately covers those positions. This is something that's done elsewhere, and it really allows this council to focus on whether or not there's effective downloading from the province, not just a responsibility, which is self-evidently the case, but whether or not the province is meeting its financial obligations, and accordingly whether the local levy is contributing to what are provincially mandated programs. So although I don't mean to take away from your debate or the reasonableness of the suggestion, it's very clear that this council wants that comfort and wants that information and that data. And so I think we actually need to take this from a larger position. At any rate, if that is which isn't an attempt to defeat this as a motion, certainly carry forward as your debate wishes to go. But I would think that the better from the corporate perspective is to do this annually and on a larger, to take into account any position like this so that you can have that information and we can have those discussions.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now I'm going back to you, Councillor Oliver. Do you wish to let your motion stand?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the county manager's comment, and he wasn't here at the time, but I recall about 3 years ago, I think, we received a report from the Health and Social Services Department, perhaps even including the health unit, I don't recall, but doing exactly what the county manager has indicated perhaps should be done every year. And it was very, very helpful to all of us around the table when we saw which of the 100% programs we were in fact subsidizing with municipal levy. So based on what he said, I'm willing to withdraw my request for an amendment. And Mr. Chair, whenever the time is right, I think we should, if we need to, and the county manager will tell us, but we should formalize a request that staff do just as he has suggested, or we'll just take him based on what's been said that it'll happen. But based on what Mr. Cribbs has said, I'm going to withdraw that request for an amendment.
Do we have a second? Oh, so we did not have a seconder, so the motion is withdrawn. Do you wish to do anything else, or just leave it and good for now? Any further questions? Councillor Height, I believe I did have you. That Councillor Oliver got me all confused.
I know, he can be so distracting,
I know.
Mr. Chair. All right, thank you. I'm on page 50, well, 49 and 50 of this report here, and throughout the report it talks a lot about the low German Mennonite population, and I know obviously in the West Norfolk there's lots of that population in that area. It appears that there will be a new satellite office for Langton going out here, quite possibly. But I guess at the bottom of the page 49, targeted outreach, It states here, this is a tri-county initiative being undertaken with the County of Oxford and the City of St. Thomas. And the targeted outreach approach for 2018 includes, and I'm just going to jump to number 3, which says, building service capacity to provide child and family programs to the low German-speaking population living in Oxford County, i.e. transportation to current services, provision of mobile outreach and services. So this isn't just for Norfolk, and are we expecting a check from the City of St. Thomas and Oxford County for doing all the work for them?
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Height, what this means is that we recognize with 2 of our neighbors, Oxford County and St. Thomas Elgin, that the 3 counties serve the low German-speaking Mexican Mennonite population. And so we believe that there is value in us working together to come up with a service model or services for that specific community that would be consistent across the board. We would only pay for services in Norfolk for Norfolk County residents. Oxford would pay for services in Oxford for Oxford County residents, Elgin the same. So it's not a matter of us paying for services that other people in other communities are using. It's just that we're committing to working together with our neighbors in order to provide a collaborative, consistent approach to providing service to this very specific population of people.
Okay, so through the chair, then Heidi, with that stands to reason that Elgin could be the leader, and we could just piggyback off of them since they have the biggest population. So are they doing something just like this, and we could just ask them to do it for us? Because when I look at our stats where people come, 5% show up, 6% show up, they could probably just do that job as well, no?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Height, those are exactly the conversations that we're having with our partners to say, you know, does it make sense to have services available in each county, or would it, example, make better sense to have the main service in Elgin, and maybe our role in Norfolk would be to make sure that the families are aware of it and have transportation to it, and that it's operated on days and hours that are accessible to them. We're really at beginning stages of these conversations, so the details of those plans aren't all sorted out just yet. But the suggestion that you've made, I think, is a really good one, Councillor Height, and are the types of programming solutions that we're talking about.
Thank you. So timing. There's a whole bunch of timing issues in this anyway as far as the communication strategy and the rollout. Would it not be better just to defer this and see where you end up with Elgin or Oxford than us hiring a person? Because technically we could have 3 people being hired from each community doing the same job.
So, Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Height, the staff person that we are suggesting to hire would be to oversee the entire early on child and family center portfolio. The services that we provide to the low German Mennonite population would be a portion of that, but we're needing someone to oversee the entire contract administration, to oversee the entire budget and funding allocations, and the entire reporting and accountability structure between the municipality as the service manager and the Ministry of Education for all of the Ontario for all of the early on child and family centers throughout Haldimand and Norfolk. So the whole system of programming.
Thank you.
You're all right? Any further questions? Councillor Sonnenberg.
Question, just a comment. If I'd have paid more attention when I was reading this report, my question was answered as to the number of children in this program on page 52. It's broken down into areas and trends and everything. It's all right there. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion moved by Black, and Columbus. All in favor? Motion is carried. Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to the county manager's comments, I just would appreciate some direction from him as to what he wants from us, if anything, relative to this initiative to annually report on our cost share and 100% programs.
I think that's a fair question. County manager, please.
I'm just in the process of messaging back and forth with our treasurer to try to work out realistically what we could do for timelines for this calendar year, appreciating we're late in the year and we have a lot on our respective plates. But really, I think in principle, it's the right way to go forward so that you have regular routine reporting to you. If this council so pleases, perhaps we could get something to you in January that would kind of retroactively look at this calendar year. That would be a reasonable amount of time for us to get a report to you. And then sort of on a forward basis, do it towards the end of the year so you get 2 in 2018 and 1 thereafter, as you so please. So I'm certainly inclined to take a look at doing that absent a motion from you, and then give you one report, because I can just put things on an agenda, frankly. And you can react to the style of the report and the information contained within it and say that's what we're I want slightly different. And then we'll sort of more formalize that for the rest of next calendar year. So we'll give you a January learning attempt and see if that doesn't fit the bill. If that so pleases you, in which case you need give us no motion. Okay. That'll simply happen.
That's fine as far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chair. And I would encourage David to, and I'm sure he will do this anyways, but to look at what was given to us, as I said, I think it's probably 3 years ago now, which was part of the budgeting, the annual operating budget process, if I recall correctly. And that format I found very, very helpful and quite straightforward. So thank you.
Knowing you, Councillor Oliver, I'm sure you'll stay on top of it if he doesn't bring it forth. And I mean that in a very positive way. Councillor Brunton.
Just a point on this. Will we, and I know we've adopted the report and so forth, but are we going to have a follow-up on this once it's implemented, but assuming everything falls into place?
Could I ask Ms.
The reason I ask that, and I'm not, she identifies on page 52 all these numbers, but it says 0 to 6, and I assume 0 to 1 and maybe 0 to 2, very little participation.
Okay. Ms. Van Dyke, would you please respond?
Mr. Chair, through you to Councillor Brenton, certainly we see the community plan as a living document that would be updated in order to meet the community needs. And similar to other community plans like the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, for example, every year we bring an annual report to advise